Resuming debate, the honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I'm happy to speak to the bill, but I can't say that I'm happy with the bill. But I will start off with maybe a few positive comments about the bill. I'm a teacher by profession, and I know that there's one of the items here is a school supplies tax credit, which would increase the credit from 15% to 25% for teachers that spend for supplies out of their pocket, including electronic devices. I think it might be about $100 that for the year that they get back. So that's positive. School ventilation improvements in BC, that will come to about $11 million. So certainly the comfort and health of students is important. The also eligible air care quality expenditures for businesses. There's some carrots. So there are some carrots inside this bill, but that's to be expected because the Liberals, when the opposition might vote against this, we'll find out. They say, well, how could you vote against teachers? How could you do this? How could you do that? This is such a nice bill. These are just the carrots. It's the real essence and the content of this bill, which is very problematic. And one of the problems in this bill is the increase. It's adding $70 billion of inflationary fuel to the fire. Since the pandemic began, there's been about $176 billion in increased expenditures beyond COVID-related. That's very significant when our deficit now, our debt right now is about $1.2 trillion. And people the Liberals might yawn and say, oh, $1.2 trillion, we can just print some more money. What's the big difference? Well, there is a real impact that is being felt at the kitchen table, in homes, for seniors, for younger people, for people everywhere. What the policies are, this government which has lost control of its expenditures, it has an impact on the cost of living. Right now we're facing an inflation of about 5%. The wage increase is about half of that, 2.4% wage increase in the last year. And so people are falling behind. They are falling behind in paying for their bills, and it's getting harder for them. I mean, just anybody who does shopping. I went shopping yesterday, the day before, with my wife, and just noticing, it was at Costco, or everywhere, any store, everything is going up. Everything is going up. Now the Liberals will say, well, this is supply chain issues, this is a worldwide issue, and deflect any criticism upon themselves. Well, the fact of the matter is, they're out of control. Spending has an impact. The Parliamentary Budget Officer was very clear about that and said that it appears to me that the rationale for additional spending initially set aside for stimulus no longer exists. Government deficits can and do contribute to inflation. They've more than doubled our debt load since they've been in. Think of all the prime ministers beforehand. Under this current prime minister, it's more than doubled. Now, what's the problem with that? I think back in the 80s and in the 90s, almost one third of all the tax revenues from all sources, income tax, capital gains tax, all sources, 1/3 of that went to pay for the interest charges of debt that had been accumulated. There is a response, there is a consequence, or consequences to out of control spending, and it will only get worse. Why? Because we're at historic lows as far as interest payments. But as that increases, and we are anticipating, the Bank of Canada, the governor has said that it will be going up. And so that will be adding to the debt and to the the need for more revenues from people because of they have to pay for the interest charges, and that means more money spent on interest means less money spent on everything else. So on healthcare, on infrastructure, everything else. So all these things have a real impact. The cost of living is going up $1,000 just in inflation alone, not including hundreds of dollars more in CPP payments for individuals this year. It is difficult, and put the onus on this government. When I was driving from the Vancouver area, Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, gas is $1.78 a liter. Someone driving a pickup for work, you're looking at about $200 Lower Mainland to pay to fill up the tank. If you got to fill up every day, that is very expensive. And it's kind of interesting on this topic that when demand goes down, prices go down. When demand goes up, prices go up. There is an increased demand worldwide for oil and gas. But the approach of our Liberal government is that this is a past industry. We need to move on. Yet Canada has the third highest proven reserves of oil and gas in the entire world, and yet they want to phase it out. 10% of our economy is based upon this, providing hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue and hundreds of thousands of jobs, and yet this is to be phased out because it's not appropriate. We provide some of the cleanest energy in the world, and yet they'd rather close down this sector with all the jobs and import from the Saudi Arabia or other countries, buy oil tanker, than to produce it right here in this country. I think that's a real shame. And right now outside on the streets, we have got protests happening all across Canada. People are very upset about the direction of this government, about what they're doing. They call people that are not vaccinated, anti-vaxxers, and inside the report, the finance minister says, well, it's about 20% of the population that aren't vaccinated. Well, 20% of the population approximately is, you multiply that by 38 million, you're looking over 7 million people, 7 million Canadians. And the Prime Minister, when he was being interviewed in Quebec, said, well, he was questioning, should we tolerate these people? Should we tolerate these people? That is irresponsible, inflammatory, wrong. It's inappropriate. I couldn't believe this. Like, it's terrible, terrible. And that's why there's frustration. Now, I know that they will point to some radicals. Yes, there will be some that are extremists. But it is being felt. People are upset. They're losing their jobs. Think if the members across the aisle or other people lost their jobs, how would they feel? And it's happening by the tens of thousands. These truckers, many of them are losing their jobs because they cannot drive across the border. Not only does that impact our supply chain issues, raising inflation and costs, but it impacts the jobs and the economy. The people are upset. And Madam Speaker, I know that they'll say, well, it's for health. Well, here's some things. People need to be able to make their own health care decisions. We support that. I'm doubly vaccinated, but guess what? I had COVID. I wasn't here the past couple weeks. I had COVID, my wife and I. Being doubly vaccinated, having COVID. The person that is vaccinated can carry just as much as the person that doesn't. I'd like to read this one little letter here before closing. This is from a lawyer, a female lawyer, 35 years old. Says this: I'm an ultra marathon runner, spent 8-9 hours, possibly 10 hours a day running. Before that, I was a varsity athlete at a university here in Ontario. Lives in my riding though, and has always been fit would be an understatement. I have no pre-existing conditions. When I got the vaccine and started having chest pains and operating at a max threshold, even on walks, tripling her heart rate. She says, as it stands, I'm a 30-year-old with chronic heart pains. She's feeling it constantly. Even on a slow walk, She goes out of breath. Please, she says, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I actually make a lot of money defending the largest pharmaceutical companies. But with that comes the knowledge that sometimes mistakes are made, and sometimes we don't.
Honourable members, time is up.